Hello, my name is Chukadin and I am the Data Science Nigeria City Lead for Owerri. So today I'm going to be taking you on the topic using Python to manipulate data on your MySQL database. So what are we going to be covering today? We are going to be covering the following subtopics: connecting Python with MySQL, creating a database with Python, defining your database schema, creating a table in Python, imputing records into your data, and querying a database from Python. So I'm going to take you through all how to do these following steps sequentially. So we are going to go through each of them. So before we get started, I would love to say a few things about Data Science Nigeria. Data Science Nigeria is simply a non-profit organization that has the following vision at heart. We have the vision to train, mentor, and inspire 1 million plus Nigerian undergraduates and graduates to build new skills in advanced analytics, data science, and to create jobs for these people through these skills. We also have the vision to build a local ecosystem that would be able to use these skills to solve local problems around them and create impact. So with this vision at the back of our heart, we strive to create things like learning programs that will equip students and graduates with the skills that they will need to become champions in the society. All right, let's get started. To get started, we are going to need the following tools. We are going to be using our Python editor. So for me, I'll be using PyCharm, and we are also going to, of course, be able to connect to our MySQL database using MySQL Workbench. If you don't have MySQL Workbench installed on your system, I'm going to provide a link below this video to enable you install MySQL Workbench. And then you can also use any Python editor of your choice, but my preferred Python editor is PyCharm. Alright, so let's get things started. So before you start querying your MySQL database with Python, you need to first of all start up your Python, your MySQL server, right? So you need to go to your MySQL Workbench and ensure that your connection is live. So to do that, you simply click. So here I'm using my local host, so I'll just simply click on it. Then to request for my password, which you would set up if you are initially creating this connection for the first time. So here I would simply input my password, and then this will give me access to the database. Now to connect to this database with Python, you simply go back to your PyCharm, that is if you're using PyCharm, or your Python editor, and connect using MySQL connector. Now if this is the first time that you're using MySQL connector, you need to actually install it. And to do that, you come to this file, then go to settings. When you click on settings, you click on Python interpreter. Then you just scroll down and you'll see what you see my SQL connector. So this is it, right? So you click on it and you install it. But since I already have it installed, I would simply import it. So, and I'll do that using the import statement in Python. So I'll import my SQL connector. Then after that, I'll now create the connection. So to create a connection, you are going to need three things. You are going to need to specify the host. So here I'm using my local host. The user, here I'm using the root. Then the password. So here you're going to use the password that you used to create the database or to secure it when you are creating the connection. So here I just use raw.password because it is not actually advisable to input your raw password into this field. because of course if this was live, someone could easily get access to your um, database with your password. So that was why I just had to put a password in a separate file. As you can see, that's why I had to import this here, then use this as a reference to the password. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment these lines of code. So once I've provided my host details, my user details, and my password, I'm going to run this to create the connection. So simply run it. Then it will return with exit code 0, meaning it was what? Successful. So now we've been able to successfully connect our Python to our MySQL database. So to ensure that the connection was created successfully, we are going to print MyDB. So to do that, I'm simply going to run this, and here we see that there was actually a successful connection, and the exit code was 0, meaning that it was successful. So when the exit code is 1, that means there's an error somewhere. Alright, so let's continue on our exciting journey. So the first thing we are going to do is to create a university database and student table. And to do that, we are going to be making use of the cursor method. So this cursor method simply allows us to be able to execute MySQL statements on the Python IDE. So here we'll simply create this. We'll say cursor is equal to mydb.cursor. So here mydb was simply the name of the connection that you created initially. So here I just assign this to mydb. So once I'm done with this, I will now use the cursor.execute. So here when I say cursor.execute, I'll now impute the MySQL statement here. So here I'm saying create database with name university db. So what this line of code here simply does is that it creates a database and assigns it a name. So here let me just give it a different name. So here let me say I want to name our database. Okay, so let me just say Nigeria University. Alright, then here I will now use the cursor.execute show database. So what this does is it lists the database that are in our MySQL Workbench, and this will also allow us to know if our database was actually successfully created. And to be able to list this, we'll use this for statement here. So we'll use this for database in cursor print database. So if I should run this code, let's see what we get. So I'll simply click on Shift F10. So here we see that it has created a database for us. So this is just the one we created, Nigeria University DB. So this is the database that we are going to be working with. And since we just want to be working with this the database, what we simply have to do is we'll come up here. So at any time we make a MySQL query on our Python IDE, it just simply references that database. So we'll come here and add a database argument, then we'll assign it the name of the database that we just created, which was Nigeria University DB. So simply just type it. Alright, so we can also check that our database was created successfully by going to our MySQL Workbench, and we need to refresh this. So once we refresh it, so now we can see Nigerian University DB. Alright, but there is still no table present in this database. So the next thing we are going to do is to create a table on our database, which is Nigeria University DB. And to do that, let's go back to PyCharm. Alright, so we are still going to use the cursor.execute statement, and then we'll write my SQL query inside the bracket. So here we'll use the create table statement. So we are saying here create table with name. So here let's change the name of the table to students university, or okay, let's just change it to university students. So here we are saying create table with name university students. Then we will now assign the columns this table will have. So here this column is going to have a variable name called name, and then the variable called math. So this name variable just is a column that would contain the names of the students. Then this math variable is a column that will contain the math score of the students. Then this GST is a column that will contain the GST, that is the general studies score of the students. Then the average is simply the average of the maths and GST score. Alright. Now this 255 here just simply us specifying the length of the allowed input. So here now this name variable is a var char, and is going to have at least an allowable length of 255 characters. Then this is the maths variable is an integer, so it's going to take inputs, and so it's going to take numbers as input, so whole numbers. Then GST an integer, then average an integer. Alright, so once we've done this, we are now going to create the table by running this statement here. So I would run this statement. Okay, so it's saying can't create. Alright, so before you do this, since we've already created the Nigeria University DB, we need to comment that line of code so that it should not keep trying to create a database again when it already exists. So here we'll just simply comment out this line of code and rerun this. So alright, this means that our database, our table was successfully created. So the next thing we have to do now is to check that out. So we still use so now we use the console.execute show table to show the table that's are in our database, and then here we'll still use the for statement. So here will be like for table in cursor print table. So this just prints the list of tables present in our database. Alright, so let me run this. Alright, so as I initially mentioned, once you've already created a table or a database, there is no point to keep running those lines of code again. So just comment that out, then run. So here now we can see that this lists the tables in our database, and here we can see the table that we just created, which is the university students table. So a way to stop the error of table, so this error that we normally get when we don't comment this line of code. So like this now, if I should run this again, I'll be getting this error. So here they say table university students already exist. So I can add an extra argument by saying create table if not exists. So now with this, it would only try to create a new table if the table is not already present in that database. So when I run this again now, you see that it just does what it's supposed to do without giving us an error statement. So we are fine now. Alright, so let's go to our MySQL Workbench to see if our table was if maybe this is not enough, or this is not enough, like so if this is not enough proof that your table was actually created, you can still go to MySQL Workbench and you just refresh this. Let me just remove this line of code, we don't need it. So we just refresh this, and then you see now we can now see our table here, university students. But is so here we can see the name column, the math column, the GST column, and the average column with their respective data types. So that means that our table was successfully created. Amazing, ain't it? Alright, so let's move forward. So the next thing we are going to do is to insert records into our table. And to do that, we are simply going to use the insert statement. So we'll be like insert into. Now insert into what? Insert into the table that we created. So here the name of our table was university students. So we'll be like insert into university students. Now here we'll simply list the names of the columns in our table. So here we have the name column, the math column, the GS column, and the average column. Then the value. So here this is just more like a placeholder. So this helps us to quickly insert records into our table. So here we just use this placeholder. So since we are inserting 4 different variables or 4 columns, we'll just make the placeholder to repeat 4 more times. Alright. So once we are done with that, we'll now begin to populate the data, right? So here I'll simply create an array of tuples. So here I'll be like, okay, fine. Let me just comment out. Alright, so here I'll be like, okay, fine. Let's now populate the data. So we have Ada, Tolu, Bisi, Okon, Fahad, Olu, and Chioma. So this is their names. So it needs to be in the order you created the names of the column. So their name first. Then this is their math score, separated by commas. So their math score. So here now Ada is her name, her math score is 50, her GST score is 65, and the average 57. So you do the same for Tolu, Bisi, Okon, and you go on. So we assign this to the variable students. Then now what we'll now do is we'll now use the cursor.execute menu. So this dot execute menu allows us to execute several statements at once. And here we'll just impute this SQL formula, that is this insert into university students, and then we also impute the student variable, so the data to be inserted. Alright, so once you are done with this, you now use the mydb.commit. Now one thing you should understand is that when you are trying to do something on your database, you are just writing the code on Python. If you don't commit it, it does not make an effect to your database. So you need to use the .commit method to be able to ensure that it reflects on your database. So I'll show you an example now. Let me assume that I did not actually do this, and I just ran this code like this. So I just inserted these values to the university students table without actually committing it. So if I should do that, it would run successfully actually. But when I come to the MySQL Workbench and refresh this, and then click on the table, and I'm now like, okay, fine, let me use this my database here, Nigeria University DB, and I'm now like select star. So that star is more like saying select all. So select star from university students. Okay, so this, I'll click this thunder sign to run the code. Okay. Okay, sorry. So let me just cut this out first and run this. Alright. Then I'll now run that code again. So select star from university student. So here I see that the data that we tried to populate was not included. Why? Why was this so? Because we did not commit it. So we not use a commit statement. We did not like commit it to the database. So that's why we need to use mydb.commit to actually make the effect. So if I should run it again now, for this time around with mydb.commit, we will see that it's going to be successful. So if I run shift F10, it still ran successfully, but this time around it actually did commit. So if I come here and maybe refresh this and run this query again, we see that it actually did populate our table with the values we intended. Alright, so let's move forward. The next thing we are going to be doing is to do the actual query on our database. So this is the meat of it all. Let's begin. Now, the first thing you may want to do is to be able to select all the data in your database. So you want to be able to like get all the data in a table in your database, right? And here we will simply use the, so let me comment out this. So we'll simply use the cursor.execute, then we'll run our SQL statement here. So it will be like select. Now this star simply means select all, right? So select star from, and here the name of our table is what? So what should we use here? Okay, you are right if you say university students. Okay, so it would be like select all the data from the table university students. Alright, so this line of code here, line 42, simply gets all the data from the table university students. So I'll simply click shift, oh sorry, yeah, control F10. Alright, so we need to output the data. So here I'll simply use the cursor.fetch all statement. Alright, so let me just cut this and put it here. So what this simply does is to get all the data from the table university student. So the next thing we'll do is we would use the cursor.fetch all statement to be able to do what? Output the data. And here we now, the next thing is to go to our for statement. So let me just copy this line of code. So I will just take this and I will explain it. So here now we've written our MySQL statement, right? And then here now we'll be like, okay, fine, for row in output. So it can be anything. You can say for I in output. It's just like more like your placeholder. So for row in output, print row. Now what this line 42 to line 45. So what this line of code simply does is this. The first statement is actually where you query the database to get all the data, right? But you want to be able to like print it on this on your console. So you'll be like, okay, fine. Let it fetch all the data from that query and let it do what? Let it print the data. So let it print the data to your console. So when I run this, what it does is it fetches all the data. So this is it, right? So this is our data in our database. So we have Ada, Tolu, Oko, Chioma. Alright, now sometimes we may just want to fetch only the first column. Like if we have a database of like, let me say 1000 rows. So here you would instead use the fetch one. When you use the fetch one statement, it will just fetch the first row. So if I should run this again, you see that it only fetches the first row, which is Ada, and then her score. So one thing we might also want to do is just to select the first 5 rows from our data, from our table, right? So here we'll just be like select star from university students, which is the name of our table, and then we'll now use this limit statement here. So it'll be like limit 5, right, to select the first 5 rows, then limit 6 to select the maybe first 6 rows. Then we'll now use the cursor.execute statement. So here will be cursor.execute const select. Then we'll now fetch all. So here just use fetch all to fetch all of the results. Then, as I said earlier, we'll use fetch one to just fetch the first row. Then for row in output, print row. So here we'll print the data from the table. So here I'll run this code, and here you can see that it fetches the first 5 rows. So we have Ada, Tolu, BC, Okon, and Fahad. Alright, so let's progress. So the next thing we might want to do is, so you might want to just select only, to select the mass scores for the students, right? We want to get all mass scores. So let me comment this. So here now I want to get all mass scores from the table university students. So here we'll make use of the select statement, right? So it will be like select math. So math here is the name of the column in our table. You must ensure that this name here matches the name of the column. If not, you get an error. So select math from our table, and then here we'll fetch the data with the fetch all statement. Then we'll print it. Alright, so let's run this. So what this does, that it gives us an output with the math scores. So sorry about that. So here now you can see that the math score 50, 65, 60, 80, 79, 67, 59, 50, 65. So the thing is that I think there was a place within the for loop that this data are duplicated when I ran a particular code more than once. So that is why, if you notice, we have duplicate data. But what it does is that it gives us the math score. So if I should go to my SQL workbench here, I'll say I can say 50, 65, 68, which matches with this output here. Okay. So now let's move forward to conditional selection. So let me comment these lines of code. Alright, so here now we'll make use of the select statement. But this time around we are going to like set some specific conditions. So we'll make use of the where statement, the order statement, to be able to like set some rules by which we should select data from our table. So for example, here now in this line 58, I want to be able to select all data from our database, but I want to be able to order this data by, I want to be able to order them in kind of in a descending order. So what this means is that, so here now I say select all from our table, and here our table is university students. So I want to order by average. So I want like the person with the highest average to come first, then the guy following to come second. So by default, this is done in ascending order, so from the lowest average to the highest average, right? So I have to add this extra statement here, DESC, meaning descending. So you should order this output from the highest average to the lowest average, right? So that is line 58. So to be able to run this, I'm going to use the cursor.execute statement, and I'll fetch all the data. So then I'll output my data. So just basically the same thing we've been doing. So if I should run this, alright, so let's run it and see. So here we can see that it gives us, oh, there are a whole lot of duplicates here. I messed, okay. So here you can see that so here now Ocon had the highest average, which was what, 88, and BC had the next highest average, which was 75, and we have Olu, which was 71. So it actually orders this by the highest average, from the highest average to the lowest average. Alright, so let's move forward. So now let's say that we want to do something more fun. Let's say we want to select only the students that have math score greater than 60 and GST score greater than 70. So here we make use of the where statement. It will be like select all data from university students where math is greater than 60 and GST greater than what, 70. So if I should run this code, we see that it only selects the students that have math. So let me just increase this. So here now you can see that these students here that have been selected, so here they have math score greater than 60 and GST greater than 70. So you won't see anyone here that have a math score that is less than 60, or a GST score that is less than, sorry, and a GST score that is less than, that is greater than 70. So here all entries here have a math score that is greater than 60 and GST greater than 70. You can also make use of the OR statement. So the OR statement simply means that they should either have a math score greater than 60 or they should have a GST score greater than 70. So a student now can have a math score greater than 60, and that is fine even if he has a GST score greater than 70, and vice versa. Unlike in the AND statement where both must be true for the student name to appear. So I'm going to run the next conditional statement with the OR. So once I run this, we will see. Alright. So it's saying, okay, yeah, so I need to change the name of the data of the table we are getting data from. So it's university students. And once I run this, so yeah, we see that it's either the students have, there are a whole lot of duplicates here. Sorry about that, but let's just pick the first one. So it's either the students have a math score that is higher than 60 or a GST score that is higher than what, 70. So once the student meets any of this condition here, his name appears on our query. So let's progress. Alright, so as you may have thought rightfully, we got those duplicate values in our data because of this. So if you notice, we kept on. So if you look at this line of code here, we did not comment this line of code out initially. So this insert into university. Yes, so we kept on inserting this data to the database every time we ran this program and committing it. So that was why we kept having multiple duplicates. So now we already have the duplicate, right? So because if you come to this data here, you see that we have Ada, Tolu, BC, and Ada again repeating itself. So we want to correct for this duplicate. So how do we go about that? So to correct for the duplicate, what we are simply going to do is, so let me just come over here. Okay. Alright, so let me just start from line 7. So, alright. So to correct for the duplicate, what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to use the cursor.execute statement. Okay. So I'll just be like cursor.execute. Then I'll now put in my SQL statement inside. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a table, and I'll call this table. I can just call it sorry about this. I can say temporal. Okay, so temporal. But let this table get the features of university students, which is the table we've been working on. University students. Alright, so once I'm done with this, I'll now continue. So once I've created that table, I'll now say, okay, fine. Insert into temporal. So now, which condition should it use to insert? It should do, or it should select the distinct value. So I would go to the next. Sorry about that. I'll go to the next line and say select distinct. Select all the data that are distinct. So the unique values from our university student database. Okay. So once is through with the selection, we should now drop the university student database. So we should just drop it. So we should drop this table, which is university students. Then once we've dropped it, we should rename. So just rename the temporal table. So rename the temporal table. So let's call it uni. Just give it the same name. University students. Sorry. So let me just go through this. So we are creating the table. We are calling it temporal. Then we are inserting into it with this following condition. Alright. So we'll select this thing. Okay. I think this should be fine. If you have any error, we'll try to resolve it. So let me just close this. Oh, I'll do my db.commit. Alright, so let's see. There's an error somewhere with our literal, which I'll try to correct now. Okay, so I've been messing things up. here. So let me just correct this. Sorry about this. Just to go to a new line. Alright, so this should work now. Okay, so if the same command is out of sync, so I'll try to rerun this and see if it goes just fine. Okay, because if I should go to my database now and refresh this, you will discover that this table here just okay. So the code actually did work, because if let's run this again now, so it has actually corrected for the duplicate. So the code actually did work, because if I run this again now, it says that the table temporal already exists. So it actually did update our database. So if you look at our table here now, university students, you see that the duplicate values are no more there. But this could have been initially prevented by, once we had already run our insert statement here, just comment insert. It will not keep inserting the data over and over again after each run. Okay, so that's fine. At least we've learned how to remove duplicates in our database, which is still a very useful skill for one to know. So if we run this query that we did before, so if I take this query now, so this query here, let me just copy this. Or okay, let me just uncomment this. Okay, all right, and comment this since we're already done with this. So if I should run this code again, you see that we don't get the normal. So now we just get the values, the unique values, and no more the duplicates that we initially got. So here we have the unique values without duplicates, which makes it cool. So if I rerun those previous queries, like initially I was trying to sort the data, I was trying to order it. If I just copy this, or let me remove this. So now it's going to run without the duplicate, meaning that we successfully moved. So sometimes in your data there might be no duplicate values and you want to correct for it. Something that happens frequently, and it's a nice skill to have, knowing how to remove duplicate values. Alright, so the next thing we may want to do is to update our table. So to update entry in our database. So for example now, um, the name Chioma here, let me go to the database. So Chioma initially had a score of 7 in her GST exam. But let's say that there was an error in marking and we want her to have a score of 90. So what we'll simply do is we'll use the update command to update the table using the update statement, update SQL statement, and so our table name is university student. So we'll now set, let's say we want to set her GST score to 90, ensure that the name matches the name of the column for it to run. So GST was what we used to name our column. Okay, so set it to 90, where name is equal to Chioma. Then once we are done with that, we now execute this, and then we'll commit. Very important. So let me just comment all this so I do not run and disturb us in the background. So here we want to update it where name is equal to Chioma. Okay, so we'll now run this. Now when I go back to my SQL Workbench and check the name Chioma, I'll see that her GST score is 90. So when I come here and run this and go to Chioma, I see that her GST score has been updated to 90. Okay, now if I want to give her a perfect score of 100, I'll simply just come back here, 100, then I'll run it. Okay, and then when I come back to my SQL Workbench and rerun this script, I see that Chioma now has a GST score of what, 100. So that is how to update tables with Python. Okay, now you may want to delete an entry, right? So for example, Okon left your school, all right? So now if Okon left your school, you may want to like remove his name from your database. To do that, you just have to use the delete statement. So delete from the table which is university student, where name is equal to what, Okon. Because if you come here now, you see that maybe this guy, this Okon here, maybe went abroad for studies or something like that. So you just have to delete his name from database, right? So use a delete statement. Then you now execute the query using the cursor.execute. Then you now commit to your database to be able to make those changes reflect. So once I run this code and I come to my database, okay, and I refresh this, so I see that the name, the entry Okon does no longer exist. Okay, all right. Now the next thing we may want to do is to delete tables, right? So to delete tables, what you simply need to do is to use the drop table command. So here I'll just be like, okay, fine, drop table university students. Then I'll execute it using the cursor.execute statement. Then I'll commit to reflect on the database. So once I run this, I'll see that the table university students will no longer exist anymore. So once I come to my SQL Workbench, it's still here, right? But once I refresh this, yeah, okay, sorry, let me refresh this. Oh, sorry, so the university students table does no longer exist. So look at this now. There is no university student again. So if I should run this query again now, I'll have an error saying table Nigeria university students doesn't exist because I've removed the table. Alright, thanks a lot for your time. I hope you really learned how to connect your Python editor to MySQL and perform some basic queries with SQL. And I hope you enjoyed this session. Please do ask your questions and I'll be willing to reply them. So I'm open for questions. Alright, so drop your questions on the live chat and I will respond them, or I'll respond to them as soon as I get to see them. Thanks a lot for your time and good day.